This is Vampire Game. Vampire Game is a pretty good game. I enjoyed it. I spent a bit of time with it. I beat the game. It was enjoyable. It's a little rough around the edges. No, like, particular glitches or anything, but, you know, there are some things that are just a bit off, you know, like broken boss AI, the normal stuff you would expect. But it has some, pretty glaring problems, and I'm not even sure how the heck these are still there, considering the game had an open beta. It's a little thing that we in the business like to call balancing. Now, balancing is what makes the game, you know, actually fun to play instead of too difficult or not difficult enough, or have just like insane difficulty curve that makes the game either get too boring or get too difficult. Usually people like to throw around this graph, and I will too, just for the sake of, you know, continuity with the rest of these videos. But balance is something that V Rising is poorly lacking in. Some of the bosses are either too easy, too difficult, have too much health, too little health, go down too quickly, or just like completely destroy you instantly. They tried to solve this by giving settings control to the player, so you can change like the amount of health you have, the amount of damage the bosses take, slash the amount of damage you do, because it's the same setting. And of course, there's general difficulty settings, which just control basically how much damage enemies do to you. And then there's a bunch of other settings, like how fast you can craft stuff, and yeah, all that kind of stuff. Because, you know, obviously they weren't very confident in their own ability to design a game that would be fun for people, so they let people decide what they want themselves, which, you know, always a great idea, and people definitely know what they want. There's not people that think that they want better graphics rather than better video games. There are those people. Or there are definitely not those people, sorry. Great decision on their part. But I mean, even if you change settings around, and no matter what settings you change, there are still some underlying problems. Because, you know, you can't change these settings for individual enemies and bosses and such like that. So, when a certain problem arises, you know, you start to see it much later on in the game, specifically when you get to this heckin' mechanic lady here, and for some reason, she's just like hellishly difficult without the correct gear. And the correct gear is something that you have to basically grind for because you don't have the ability to even get it yet. But if you tweak the settings so that she's at a good difficulty, then pretty much all of the other bosses will be a complete joke. Until, of course, you need to fight another boss and get better gear, because that boss will probably be stupidly difficult too, until you get to the next gear set and plow through more bosses. Like, I don't know who designed this game, I don't know who was playtesting this game, but obviously they didn't do a very good job, because no matter what difficulty you're on, you're either getting absolutely destroyed by a boss, or plowing through it like it's absolutely nothing. I played this game on normal mode, because, you know, I would consider myself a gamer of, like, average skill level. Yeah, I did play Elden Ring, I beat Elden Ring. So, you know, I thought normal mode would be the correct mode for me to play this game in. But apparently not, considering that I had to change the health to 3 times its original value. And some of the bosses later on, I still barely killed. Like, and then of course, there's some bosses that are in the same level that just do nothing. Like, if I use the correct gear level for a boss, or where I would do it at, then I just completely destroy the boss. Like, this game's balancing is all over the place. Like, remember that graph I showed you earlier, right? Like a game like Elden Ring on the more difficult side, but of course still fun, would look more like this. However, V Rising would look something like this. And you know, that's a bit problematic, considering that, you know, you want to at least be consistent with your game's difficulty instead of making it all over the place and making some of your bosses a complete joke and the other part of your bosses be hellishly difficult. I don't know if this was a problem with co-op, I don't know if this was a problem with the fact that I was playing on normal difficulty, but there's something about this that is terribly wrong. And you know, being someone who plays video games often, and someone who has a bit of experience in game design myself, I decided I would, you know, try to provide some other solutions. So, starting with solution number 1 to this problem, I came up with, you know, a pretty simple solution that I'm surprised they didn't just add, considering that I'm probably not the first person to talk about this. But yeah, no, solution number 1 that I came up with is to simply change the healing. Because healing in this game is completely garbage. Because all of the healing, the only sources of healing that you can get, are either stupidly tiny amounts from skills and spells and stuff like that. Healing from after you dash, because, you know, after you dash, for some reason your next attack heals. I don't know why. That's just a really weird thing to put in, because, you know, yeah. But the healing is completely garbage, because the only other healing items give you healing over time. But the thing about that healing over time, because, you know, healing over time by itself would be fine, is that if you get hit while healing over time, it just stops. So you have to find an opportunity to actually use the healing item, which is a bit difficult because all of these bosses just spam attacks. And, you know, the ones that don't are complete jokes that you don't need to heal on, because you can actually dodge other attacks. So, you know, either they're spamming or you don't need to heal on them at all. And, you know, the problem with bosses being that spammy is that you don't really have opportunity to heal that much. And even when you do, chances are you're gonna get hit before your healing ends, meaning you're gonna need to heal again. And when you heal, that leaves the boss an opportunity to attack you, so you usually end up dying. So, you know, healing is almost completely useless in the cases that you would need it. In the cases that you don't need it is the only time when it's viable. You start to see the problem here, don't you? Is that you've designed your healing system so that it's only useful when it's not useful, which completely defeats the purpose of having a healing item in the first place. We have the same problem with the dash, but, you know, I'll get to that later. First, talking about the healing, all they would need to do is, instead of having it heal over time, just heal a big chunk. Make it an Estus flask. Literally just have it heal like 30% of your HP, because all of the healing items are percentage based. Have it heal like 30% of your HP, and put the same cooldown they have on dash on it. Because dash, for some reason, dash/dodge has a 10-second cooldown. And there, you know, that becomes slightly problematic when you have bosses spamming projectiles that deal 1/10 of your health every time you get hit. And, you know, later game bosses also have the issue of dealing massive amounts of damage, you know, 10% of your hit point whenever you get hit. These bosses have multi-hit attacks that still do crazy amounts of damage, so they just melt your health. And then you have to find opportunity to dodge until they stop attacking, which, you know, never happens. Because the bosses that you would actually have opportunity to heal on do either abysmal damage or they're really easy to dodge. You know, like the bear. I don't have footage for the bear, so whatever. All of these issues come together to form a completely crappy combat system. That's, you know, good when it's good. It's good when it's well balanced, which is extremely, extremely rare. You know, some of my favorite boss fights are at least somewhat balanced, like Adam. He's pretty fun, unless, you know, you get stun locked, or you get unlucky and he just throws you 7 times in a row, or he spams too much and you can't dodge any of it because your dodge has a 10-second cooldown. Yeah, right, next, the dodge, completely horrible, completely useless dodge. Same issue as the healing, like, whenever you would go to use the dodge, like, that's only for the attacks that are super spammy, is when you would actually need to use the dodge, because the rest of the attacks you can just get out of normally. I mean, you know, it actually does have its use cases sometimes, unlike the healing. But I feel like the cooldown is too long. Like, if you're gonna make dodge-type bosses, make the dodge, you know, actually work when you need to dodge the bosses. You know, take Elden Ring, for example. Your dodge doesn't technically have a cooldown, because all the bosses are meant to be dodged. Or, you know, Diablo, where you don't really have to dodge that much, but when you do, you know, you can actually dodge the bosses. I also didn't get footage for Diablo, because I really don't want to play Diablo 4 right now. But all of these games, like, they keep your dodge in mind when designing the boss. In Vampire Game, however, you either can't dodge when you need to dodge, or can dodge when you don't need to dodge. Which basically just turns your dodge into a glorified sprint key, where you just do a little thing that makes you move faster, which, you know, I would get if that was if that was what the dash was intended for. That's not what the dash is intended for. Because, you know, the dash is intended to be a dodge. At least I'm pretty sure it is, considering the amount of crap bosses throw out, and considering how much damage they deal to you. Which, you know, they're throwing out big time numbers here. You know, like a 10th, maybe even like half if the boss is feeling extremely trollish. Like, they completely destroy you, you know, if they do any damage at all. Because, you know, there are of course some bosses that you can just like run around and they deal like 5 damage. So, yeah, that's the main problem here. Solutions include simply replace the healing with an Estus flask, because you made Dark Souls bosses, basically. Or, you know, fix your dash, you know, make the dash actually viable, or both, you know, if you're feeling generous. You don't have to do both, like, they could just change one and the game would work perfectly fine. However, third solution, balance the bosses better. Because I like the combat, it's mainly a problem of the fact that the bosses either spam too much or too little. I would say you probably just need to, you know, bring some of the boss's damage down, bring some of it up, you know, give some of the bosses that have too much health, like Dracula, bring those guys down to have less health. You know, that would be cool. And, you know, also possibly scale the bosses in co-op. You know, maybe they're doing that, but it's kind of hard to notice. But, you know, possibly make it so that the best way to play the game isn't to change your server settings for every single boss. Because that's a pain, and nobody should have to do that. And I'm guessing that nobody wants to do that, and the people that do want to do that have something wrong with them. Yeah, fix your bosses or fix the game. Do one of those two instead of leaving it as it is. Moving on from that, do these people understand the point of a game being in early access? So the point of a game being in early access is for people to tell you your mistakes so that you can fix them. And I've seen at least 2 people from the early access complaining that this game is unbalanced, like talking about how spells are unbalanced, they do too much damage, ignoring completely the root of the balance problem, being all the enemies are just completely inconsistent. If people are complaining about this stuff in early access, you would think that they would fix it. But, no, they didn't fix it. They just completely ignored it and left it as is. Completely defeating the purpose of an early access. So, what was the point of the early access in the first place? Because why would you have an early access if you just were gonna heckin' ignore all of the feedback and not fix anything? I mean, they probably fixed some stuff. I wouldn't know because I didn't play the early access. I didn't get it. They probably fixed some stuff. But if I can still complain about this much, your game is bad. It's balanced horribly, and you need to fix it. They're probably not gonna fix it, ever, and it's just gonna stay like this. If they do, I would be pleasantly surprised. But Stunlock Studios, fix your goddamn game. It really wouldn't be that difficult. If a 15-year-old can tell you ways to fix your game, professional game designers should be able to do better. Moral of the story is, be Valve, playtest your video games, and when you find mistakes, fix them. If other people find mistakes, fix them. And don't leave that choice up to your players. Aren't you glad I avoided making the pun that you get stunlocked because they're named Stunlock Studios? Cause haha, funny. Yeah.